Hello everyone, I hope you are doing great. It's been a long time I haven't uploaded any video because of work commitments and then other project integration. So today in this lab I'm gonna show you how to deploy Jenkins and SonarQube to AWS using Terraform. So like the main aim of this lab is to know how to deal or to interact with Terraform and then provision some services on AWS using the Terraform code instead of doing it throughout the console. And I will show you after what are the benefits of using infrastructure as code instead of going throughout the console and do all of everything manually. So the first thing is like when you do it manually, maybe during the deleting of those resources you might miss some resources. And let's assume that you have an AWS organization where you have too many accounts and you need to replicate all the things you done in one account in another accounts, or maybe you want to do the same thing in different regions. In this case, to go and do it manually, it's gonna be very tough. So that's why infrastructure as code come into the play, so it can help you to not have these tough tasks, and instead of that you can write only one code and you can deploy it in different accounts, and maybe you can share it with your colleagues in the teams, and in this case you will help them to automate their infrastructure. So I have already worked on a project and it's already on my GitHub repo. If you go to my GitHub repo, you will already find it there. So it is here. But me, I will walk you through all the steps to create it. So please make sure to stay at the end till the end of the video so to get more useful informations. So let's start then. So first thing I'm going to do is go to my VS Code, is my preferred text editor, and I will start by creating a folder. This folder I will call it modules, because during this session I will try to show you how to work with Terraform modules. It is very very famous and it is used by many companies. So Terraform modules is well known. And then during this lab I will have three modules. One module to create the VPC, the other one to create the EC2 instance, and the other one is to create the RDS. In other words, one module to create the network infrastructure, the other one to create the compute infrastructure, and the last one is to create the database infrastructure. So we will start with the VPC, as it's like the main thing, or we need to prepare the network infrastructure where we're gonna host our resources. And this is the modules in the VPC. I need to create three mains files. First one called main.tf. This is where like our code or the resources will be. And this other one is variables. This file enable us to put some variables that will be used by the resources that we're gonna create them. For example, which VPC name, how many subnets I want, on how many AZs I want. All this configuration I don't need it to be static, but I want it to be dynamic. So therefore, I need to put some variables here, and these variables I will call them outside of those modules from the main.tf file that will be in the root folder. I will show you later how this is working. So, and then we have the outputs.tf file. So this outputs.tf file, for example, let's assume that you have another component in your code that depends or use some items from the VPC. Let's assume that you want to create an EC2 instance, and the EC2 instance will require to have like a VPC ID or require you to have subnets. And the same thing for RDS. For RDS to create the DB group, you need to have subnets. So therefore, I need to provide those credentials to the other components. To do that, I need to go on the level of each module and do the outputs. And the outputs is just the name that will be used by the other component to call the output of the resource that are created in VPC. So in variables, I have these variables here that I'm just gonna go here and copy them. So I will provide the VPC name, the CIDR, the AZs, the private subnets, the public subnets, and whether I want to have the NATs or not. So let's copy them, all of them here, and paste them. So once I have all the variables here, I will start to create the resources. So when I'm trying to create the resources, I will give you a simple way how you can do this on your own, because you just need to have like internet, and then you don't need to remember by heart what are the attribute of each resources. What you need to remember is just like go to Google, for example, and you type AWS VPC Terraform, for example, and then you will have the first resource, and you can go through it. To give you an example, if you don't want example, you can go through what are the arguments used by this resource to be created. There are few of them are optional, other ones are required. So all the ones that have optional front of them, you don't need to provide a value for them. So first thing I'm gonna start with is to have a resource. I will type AWS and then VPC. So to have this option, so this can help you like for completing what you look for. You just need to go to marketplace and you search for Terraform, and the one that has the badge is the one you select and install it. So we have VPC, and instead of giving it a name or to the resource, you can give it only this. Why I am using this? Because I am sure that in this folder there is one resource that's called AWS VPC with this name. If I have another resource VPC, I should give it another name, because this resource name should be unique, because it is the only way that Terraform map your resources. So let's back here and see what I done in the main.tf. So in this main.tf, I just have locals. Local is look like variables. But for example, let's assume that you have one variable or one operation to do. For example, let's assume that I have some operation here. I have some multiplication, whatever, some logic here. So I need to put it in local instead of using it in variables. In variable, you just provide the value, or you define what is the type, and you put some validation on the variable. But when you try to do some logic, for example, using the length, and if you want to, for example, you have another variable, let's assume that in variables you have a list, and you want to provide a list with the list you have in the variables. So for example, you can use the method flatten. So you can use like the flatten method allow you to have one list. When you have one list inside like two lists inside one list, you can flatten them, and all the two of this list will create only one list with the items that are without sorry the items that are in the two list. I hope that is clear. So I just create the resource. I provide the CIDR block, and the CIDR block will be from the CIDR variable. I enable DNS supports and DNS host names. And after that, I have used tags. In tags, I called a method called merge. And the merge method, if you provide two objects, it will create a new object that's combined between the two of objects. And then I will create internet gateway. Then like here, I will create an elastic IP address because this is the way how to create a NAT gateway. But the NAT gateway, either I will use it or not. You see here, I am putting a condition on whether to create the NAT gateway or not. As you know, the NAT gateway costs too much money. So therefore, I don't use it for this lab as long as I am putting my RDS in private subnets, which does not require any reachability to internet. But for the ones that they will be reachable throughout internet, I will put them inside public subnets. I will use the SonarCube and then the Jenkins. Both of them will be in public API, in public subnets. So public subnets are already connected to the internet through the internet gateway. So you don't need to use NAT. But I just put in it as an optional for people that want to deploy NAT. And I put a condition here. I said count, then I put a condition here that if the value or the variable was true in the NAT, because it's of type bool. In programming language, we call Boolean. So if it's true, then I will create 1. If it's not, I will give it 0. And what does 0 mean? Means that count will have 0. This resource will be not created. And the same thing for this resource, because both of these resources are used to create the NAT gateway. So I have not to create one and list the other one. Either I create both of them or I don't create them. And to do that, based on the variable, I decide whether to create them or not. But make sure that when you will reference to this resource, you need to put 0, because actually this count will send you a list. The output of this resource will be a list because we are using count. So therefore, we need to use like select the first item, and then in the first item, I select the ID. After that, I am using the subnet ID. But before going here, let me go toward the subnets, then back to here. So to create subnets, I am using count. And count, it will create the number of subnets based on how much or the length of the list of public subnets. So if you see here, I have public subnets is a list of string. So therefore, in locals, I have count, or I take the length of the variable of the public subnets. And based on this length, I will create the number of subnets. And you see that here I am not putting this because I have another resource called AWS subnet for private subnets. So to not be confused, I need to call this one private and the other one public. So I have created them. I provide the VPC ID, and to provide the VPC ID, I just reference the VPC ID I already have, right? So the vpc.this.id. And how should I know this thing? So if I am back into the documentation, I will scroll down to the attribute reference. This attribute reference is available to you once the resource are created. And among the attributes, we can find the ID of the VPC. So to reach to this ID, I need to call the resource and then the name. I can call this one a logical name. There is logical name and there is physical name. The physical name is the name of the resource on the AWS. Means, for example, I create an EC2 instance and I give it a name of Jenkins. So Jenkins is the physical name of the instance. But to reference it in the Terraform code, I need to call it with a logical name. So if you come here, you will find that I have called the resource dot the logical name. It is this because I have this already here. And then I call the attributes that will be available for me once the VPC is created. It's called the ID. And then I will choose the CIDR block. The CIDR block is I choose the public subnet, and then I do count.index. So this method is already predefined in Terraform, is enabling you to select one item from the list that have this index. And this index is changed incrementally. For example, let's assume that you provide 2 here. Maybe let's assume that we provide two public subnet CIDRs here. Then the length will be 2. In this case, I will count from 0 and 1. And the last value will be excluded. It's like the program in C programming language. So here I will select an element from this list and I will use this index. So first time this resource is created, the count will be 0. And because as long as I'm providing this count to 2, imagine I am having a loop that go from 0 to 2, and 2 is excluded. So the first value will be 0 and the second one will be 1. So here, this block will create to me 2 resources of subnet. After, like we have the subnets, we have the root tables. I will create a root table for the public one because both of subnets will have different root tables, because the public one, I want to route traffic to the internet through the internet gateway. But for private, I want the connection to reside only within my VPC. Then I associate the root table to the subnet I have for public subnets. And for that, I am providing the subnet IDs of the public subnets I just created here. As long as this one gonna render me 2 items, right? So therefore, to have or to reach to the ID of the subnet, I will go to the documentation and do AWS subnet Terraform, and they can see what are the attributes that will be rendered once the resource is created. So I will scroll down. So there is argument. So argument is something when I am trying to create the resource, I need to provide it. But the attributes is something that is available for me to use it or are used by another resources, and they can reach to it once the resource is created. So among the attributes that are rendered once the resource is created is the ID. But here I am having a count. So this, I am sure this block will render me a list of items. In this case, as long as we will use two two public subnets, we will have two items. So this method of I will go to the subnet and the resource name dot the name of the resource, and this between brackets and do asterisk dot dot. This asterisk will render me another list. It's like I'm doing for loop, and I am going to each resource, and I'm getting the ID. So this one is just going to go through each item in the list, and they will render the ID of that subnet. And I'm selecting each element of the list by the count, because count I am using it here. So how Terraform will read this? So count is the length of the public subnets. We have two. So it will loop from 0 to 2. 2 is excluded, so it will count 0 and 1. So once it will be 0, it will go. This one already will render a list, and they will select the first item. So the second loop will go to this item, to this list, and select the second item. And then it will go to root table. So if you want to know which resource render which attributes, you just go to documentation as I showed you before. You just type the name of the resource, and you will know which attribute are rendered during once the resource are created. And then I provide the internet gateway, or I creating a route. Here I didn't use count because the routes are assigned to one route table. As long as I'm creating one route table, I don't need to do count. Otherwise, if for example I'm using AWS WAF to have some more constraints on each subnet, I should create for each subnet a route table. But as me, for public subnets, I want to create only one route table, and for private subnet, I want to create one route table. That's why I will create one route table. So therefore, any routes, I will assign it to the route table. It will be like one, because here I'm just assign it to internet gateway. If, for example, I have too many routes, for example, let's assume in big organizations, they try to route traffic internally, maybe they using transit gateway, using another like a VPN and so on. So therefore, here I will do a count, and they will provide the list of the CIDRs where I want to get. For example, I want to get to the transit gateway through what transit gateway attachment ID and so on. But as long as I am just want to forward traffic to the internet through the internet gateway for this public subnets, and they have only one route, so I just add in only one resource without using the count. So the same thing I did it for the public subnets, I will do it for private subnets. I hope that's clear for you. And make sure here that even in the private route, I create a route table, but in private route, I add in a route only if I enable NAT, because by default, when you create a route table, it will create you one route by default. That route is like when you try to communicate locally, that route is for communication locally. But if you want to communicate with other resource that have CIDRs different than the CIDR you have locally for your VPC, in this case you need to define routes. Otherwise, you will not reach your destination as long as you didn't define the routes in your route table that is attached to the subnets. I hope that is clear for you. And let's be back here now. Once the public is created, now my NAT, I want it to be right in a public subnet, because in a NAT, the NAT should be in public subnet. And then I will go to the route table of the private subnet, and they will say, look, if you want to reach to the internet, go to the NAT. forward the traffic to the NAT, and the NAT will forward it to the internet gateway as long as it resides in the public subnets. So how this happen is the subnet, once the traffic is initiated from within the subnet, it will go directly to the route table. The route table will know where to forward the traffic. So the traffic will go to the NAT gateway. The NAT gateway residing inside the public subnet. And inside public subnet, when the internet or when the resource try to reach to the internet, they need to attack the internet gateway to go to the internet. And then the traffic backs to the destination. So here I have created the infrastructure, or what we call it, the network infrastructure. So I will just copy this thing. Instead of going and do this thing manually, it's gonna take me too much time, and I don't want to make the video very long for you. What I want you to know is to understand what is the essential things and the principles, and then you can do this thing for any resource you want to create through the Terraform. So I will copy it here, and I will paste it. I mentioned something before about here. I missed to copy one variable that's called tags. Last time I did a copy, so I have variables. Let me put it here. And then let's assume that like in the future, maybe I want to create an EC2 instance, and the EC2 instance I want to create inside a VPC within a private subnet. In this case, to provide those informations from within the module, I cannot reference the resource that's inside the module. But what I can reference, I can reference the output name from that module. So therefore, I need to create the outputs of these VPCs. So for example, what are the most beneficial information I can get from that VPC? Is like the ID of the VPC, the CIDR of the VPC, the public subnet's ID, the private subnet ID, and then like this private route table is like we don't need it, but maybe in the future if we need anything and we don't have it here, we just come and then create output, the name, and make sure the name is unique across all the other output you have within this file. So you have example, and then whether you give it description, you can give it description. So during the output of this module, it can be readable and understandable by other people who work with you, so they can understand what that output means. And then, but the main attribute or required attribute is the value, and the value is just the name of the resource you want to output its attributes, dot this one I give it logical name, dot the attributes that are available once the resource is created. If it's not clear, anything is not clear, please clarify me on the comments so I can explain you this. So I will copy this output and I will go here and paste it. So now my resources are ready, my module is ready. So from here I can now provide this module to anyone on my team. He just need to call that module, and then he provide this variable based on his requirements or her requirements. Then he'll be able to deploy a simple VPC infrastructure. So now we will go to the step how to use this module. It's there, but if I execute the Terraform code, nothing will happen because I haven't yet used the module. I just like a declaration, but I haven't used it yet. So to use it, I need to create a file. and the standard name of files should be created. Here you can call it whatever, but the standard one is main output variables. So I will create here the main.tf file. You can call it whatever, and then you need to type module, and here you give it a name, a random name, and like let's give it a name that makes sense. So we call it source, and this call it, sorry, VPC, and in the source is where my VPC module resides. So I will do dot, and you see it's here. So now it gives me an error. Why? It will show me that there are some required attributes that needed by this module to function. And these required variables are coming from here, are here in the variables. So all of these ones are required. So in this case, I need to make sure to put them here. Either I can go and put them from from within console, sorry, like in this file, or as long as I'm creating only one module VPC. So I need to create it in a place where I can provide a static values based on my needs, and these ones will be used later on. So therefore, I will create a Terraform .tf vars. So how to inject Terraform variables? There are three ways. The first one is to create a file that have this name, terraform.tvars. And the other one is to provide the variables during the execution of the Terraform commands. And the last one is export a variable, but it should be prefixed by tf underscore, right? So this is the three ways. I'm using one way is you create a file with this name that should be terraform.tvars. When you provide this tvars, you don't need to provide to Terraform to say, please, I want you to take the values of the variables from this file. By default, it's predefined that if there is any file called terraform.tvars, I need to use it. But if you provide another file with a different name, you need to do minus var file and you provide the name of the file. Otherwise, the Terraform will not know that file and will start to ask you to provide the variables manually for each variable. Okay. So now I want to use, for example, VPC name. VPC name, I want to put variable dot. Nothing appear for me. Why? Because when I'm doing var, I'm not gonna reach to this variable, I have it here. But I need instead to create another file called variables for declaration. So I will declare the variable here and they will provide its value here. And then I can just reference the variable that are here and automatically Terraform will understand the value of this variable that will have the same name. Maybe you can give it another name, but just to standard ways to provide the same name here, and then but here in the main you need to provide the name of variable as are mentioned here, not as are mentioned here. So what from here or here, if you declare variable, let's assume that you create a variable for VPC and you call it VPC name blah blah. So when you come to main, you need to do var and slash VPC. You see only this one that appear for you as an option because it residing in the same place as the main. I hope that makes sense. But here these arguments should have the name as variable here. So I will come back here and then I'm just gonna provide this one. So these variables are not here. So I need just to copy variables from here and then paste it. Now the error disappeared. But if I do Terraform, start to apply it, it will not work. First thing, because I still need some configuration, is the provider and then the credentials of AWS use it to deploy this thing on AWS. And the second thing, if I fix already that configuration, the second thing that I haven't yet provided the value of for variables. So Terraform will start to ask me to provide the variable's name, the variable's value, one by one, for the ones I haven't provide value for them. That's why sometimes in variables you can find default. So when you have like default attribute, this default is either you want to provide the variable during the execution of your code. If you provide the new value, this default value will be overwritten. Otherwise, this default value that will be used. So in this case, to provide the values, I will provide them. In this case, I will use the one method of the other mentioned method I told you how to can provide the value of the variable in Terraform. So I have it already here. I will just go to Terraform vars, and then I will go and provide this thing here. You will see that for a variable that's called tags, I haven't, this main is not complain on me. In main, there is no error because I already provide a default. And say enable, I say false, for example. So I don't want to enable NAT in this VPC. So now what is the next step is to do the configuration, is to create the provider. Means first thing we need to have is like what are the code, because these resources should be first installed, right? It's like, for example, let's assume a programming language Python. So to execute some command, to use some packages, you need to import them first. And the same thing in Terraform. To use the resource subnet, resource route table, and so on, you need first to install this resource, and this resource are installed locally. When you do Terraform init is installed on your local machine. And to do that, to install it, you need to create a configuration for that. So you need to create the provider. So I need to go and create a file and call it provider.tf. So now, because many people use this sender way. So for example, if I'm going and looking in a GitHub repo, and once I will get to any GitHub repo, I will understand that the provider is containing the configuration of the Terraform version I want to use, the credentials, which method of authentication is used by the provider to have the permission to deploy to the AWS, and then I can have the configuration of the remote state. This remote state I will mention it later on. So here I provide the version of Terraform I want to use, and then here I'm using region US West 1 is Ireland, because in the other regions I already I reached the limits of creating VPCs. In Oregon, in North Virginia, in Paris, these three regions, well-known regions, are already are reaching to limits to 5 VPCs. Like, yeah, for me is for like for a simple account. If you want you can exceed this limit by going and talking, asking the when you reach the quota, you can go to AWS support team and then you can extend the number of VPCs. But me, as like just using my account only for doing labs and training, so I reached for three regions the limits of 5 VPCs. So that's why I'm using Airland region in this lab. So here I'm providing how to authenticate to AWS. I'm using profile. This profile is like on my AWS on locally when I configured AWS using the either assuming a role or creating an IAM user on the AWS, then copy the credentials and paste it on the .aws folder / credentials and conf file, right? This file is folder residing under the home. So if you are in Linux, you just need to go to /home / your user and you do ls -la to see the hidden folders, and you will see there is a folder that's called .aws. If you don't have it before, you need to do AWS configure and make sure that you create already a user in AWS that will provide you with the AWS access key ID and AWS secret access key. So now let's open my terminal and start to deploying this. So first thing I need to do is Terraform init. So Terraform init command, just you see, gonna install those the AWS resources and also will initialize my VPC module. We can wait for that. So successfully initialized. So the next step is to do Terraform plan. Some people do outs and you need to type the name of your Terraform plan. I don't use it. So Terraform plan is the Terraform plan gonna enable you to see what are the resources that gonna be created. And if we scroll down, all the ones that have plus sign, green +1, is gonna add it. If you see like tilde, like yellow tilde, means that resource attribute will be changed, and you can see red hash means that the resource will be destroyed. So we'll scroll down, and next step is to do Terraform apply. I will do auto approve. Auto approve means that I'm agree to deploy these resources to my AWS. Otherwise, it will ask you to type yes, because this command is usually used on when you have a pipeline on your AWS. Sorry, no pipeline, not on AWS, but only, for example, you can use this command on any CI tool you are using, GitLab, Jenkins, whatever. You need to use the Terraform apply minus auto approve instead of, otherwise this error will fail because it will need manual intervention. So to avoid that, you need to add this option to the command. So this one will deploy it without any required manual intervention. So let's back to variables. So my VPC name is called DevOps. So I need to go, when I will go to my AWS account, once this resource is created, and they will go to VPC, I will find the VPC with the name called DevOps. And then with CIDR of 19, 10 dot blah blah slash 16. So when I will go to my AWS, I will go to Ireland, and then search for VPC. Sorry, need to go here, VPC. So I have already this one with this CIDR. I will find if I am copying this ID. I'm using that ID to filter VPC ID. Just put it like this. We'll find that you have public subnet 1, private subnet 1, private subnet 2, public subnet 2. For the public one, I will go to the route table. I will find it is adding a route to the internet throughout the internet gateway. But for the private one, will be only one route. Is the default one that route traffic locally. Okay, so now, but if I go to the NAT gateways, no NAT gateway created because I put the value of creating it to false. So next step now for this lab is to create a Jenkins server using the Terraform code. For that, I'm going to create another module and they will call it EC2. And the same way, creating three files, main.tf, .tf, and variables .tf. I will back to the already prepared code and they will start with, you will see there is another different file called data. Okay, so now I will go to variables and see what are the variables I'm using here. It's just like simple variables. There is ingress, and this ingress is just like, because within this module or within this file, I will create a security group, and security group I will provide a variable of ingress, means what are the ports I need to open. That's why. So instance name, instance type, the VPC ID, the subnet ID, and the user data. So the user data is the script that will be executed when the instance is booted for the first time. If you start and restart the instance, this user data are not executed, are executed only the first time the instance is booted. And then, okay, let me explain you what is data. So in Terraform, there is resource and there is data. So we use the resource, I mean this resource, to create new resources. And we use data to import the existing resource that we already have. For this case, in this block, allow me to retrieve like the ID of the instance of Ubuntu, the most recent Ubuntu instance. And because instead of providing the Amazon machine image, I will use the data will use this method to import some specific version of EMI. And then, so to create the resource of AWS instance, let's assume that I'm a beginner of AWS. I don't remember well this arguments I should provide. As I showed you before, you just need to copy this one. You to go to Google, you type it, you do Terraform. Yeah, first option, and you go through it. What are the arguments is required by this resource to be created? So if I scroll down, you see optional, optional, optional. This you don't need to put them, but other ones are required. For example, the EMI, for example. The one that are required, you don't need. It will ask you to provide the name. You see, required unless you provide the launch template and so on. So the required arguments is to provide the Amazon machine image, the security groups, the instance type, the subnet ID, and the user data. This user data is optional, but me, I want to install Jenkins during the booting of the instance. I will not go to the AWS and then do it manually. Then here I'm going to create a security group, and I will show you, I will teach you another thing is dynamic block in Terraform. So let's assume that you have too many ports that you need to edit or add it in the inbound roles. So instead of going manually and do ingress for the first port, the second, the third, and if you have hundreds of like whatever the inbound roles, instead you will need to do is to provide the list of the ports you want to add them in the ingress or in the inbound roles, and this will dynamically create you. It will loop over all the ports, and then for each port will create an inbound role. Or it will create a role within the inbound roles. Not for each one will create inbound roles, because inbound role is like the component, and within it we have a list of roles, and each role allow specific port. In our case, we allow HTTP, sorry, SSH, and another port is ATH, the default port that Jenkins listen on. And then make sure to add this block. Otherwise, the security group that will be attached to the instance will have now egress traffic. So when the instance will try to install the Jenkins and the instruction that we will provide to do, and some packages from the internet, when it will try to initiate the traffic to the outside, it will not, because if we don't provide this one, then it for AWS, this instance should not reach the internet, because like if you know that security group is stateful, means if the traffic is coming in, even I don't provide the egress, the traffic will come back. But if the instance itself will initiate the connection, so it will want to initiate the connection to the outside, in this case I need to have egress. And even if I don't specify the ingress, the traffic will back into the instance. Not like the network access control list are stateless. I need to allow the traffic in, and I need to allow the traffic out. So if I am allowing the traffic in and I'm denying the traffic to out, specific port, then the traffic will be denied. But in security group, when you allow the traffic to be in, even if you restrict it or you deny it to be out, it will get out. I hope that makes sense. So, and in the output, just provide the public IP address. So I will just go and then copy these files here. So I cannot make the video very long. So now I have the module of the EC2 instance. And to call this module, to use this module, I need to go to the main and the module. Let's call it Jenkins. We'll do source EC2, and then it give me this error because I need to provide required attributes. And the required attribute, as long as I mentioned some attributes that are not required for the resource itself, for example, user data, but if are mentioned in variables and they haven't provided its values, it will keep showing me that error. So in the value, I will just gonna back here and then copy that. So I need to put this one like this here. And if you understand well why this error still appear, means that so far you are good to go with Terraform. So why this error is still appearing here? Because I haven't mentioned these variables. The variables that I am still using them here are not mentioned here. It's not mandatory to use the same name we have it here. You can, like, as long as we'll provide two variable with different name here, and this variable value I will provide it to this one. That's what matter. So we'll just back here and then let me copy the all variables. And then the error should disappear. I haven't yet do this one because this one is a local. So to do that, let me back to the alt code and see you. So when you go to the data, you will see I have used another thing. So that's why I'm insisting you to watch this video until the end, because during this lab I cover the most used things on the Terraform is the template file. So the template file, right, enable you, for example, let's assume that you want to put a bash script, and within this bash script there is variables that should be dynamic. So like you want to substitute these variables you have within your bash or whether your Python script, it does not matter what is the thing you are using it, but you want to substitute that variable with its value. So in this case, I recommend you to use the template file. So the template file will enable you to have dynamic variable without your script, and you can change it from here only. So you just need to provide this value from here as this way. So in this case, we will use this thing later on when we are having the session of installing SonarQube with Jenkins as well. So you just need to put the variables, and these variables are already mentioned inside this file, and just you need to specify the path file to this template file. And if you don't have any variables or dynamic variable you want them to be substituted, you don't need to provide them. It's not something that's required, but is optional. But if you have variables that need be to substituted, you need to provide their value here. So in this case, I'm going to go to data. So data, I'm going to use the Jenkins template. The template resides in template folder in Jenkins.template file. And you see the template is just a bash script that install Java and then install Jenkins. That's it. But if I go to SonarCube, you can see this bash enable you to create, install Java, do so many configuration. But you see there is another variables here. That's DB username, DB password, and DB host. And these variables, I need to substitute them. It means I need to provide them in the template. So the template will replace this variable with its values that I gave them here. I hope that makes sense. So I will just need to go and copy this and create this inside data.tf, and then copy this folder here, and they have using locals to call it. So I need to create file. Like in the Terraform, we can combine all the things we have it here in one file, but it will be very difficult for people to know or to manage this thing in the future. When you have too many things, you will have hundreds of lines of code, locals, templates, data, all of this thing is, all of them is combined and all of them is merged, so it will be very hard for them to understand it. So me, when I am like Terraform developer, I can go through the Terraform code, I will understand the locals. There is only some kind of variables that I need to change. Data, I will understand that I will import something already exists in the module. The main, I need that the main code is executing here. I will know what are the resources gonna be created in the output.file. I will understand what are the variable or the outputs, like the attribute of the resources I'm going to create it that will be used later on by other resources, and so on. So in this case, I need to come and then create locals. So locals is just in this way. Locals I create for SonarCube and then for Jenkins. For now, I'm just using just Jenkins. You see now everything is good to go. What I will do is just going to deploy this thing, but first I need to provide the values of these variables, because even if I don't provide the variables, if I try to do Terraform plan, I need first to do Terraform init to initialize this resource I just created. Every time you create a new module, you need to initialize it. Perfect. Now if I try to do Terraform plan, you see var.ingress enter the value, because I haven't provide the value of the variable. I can provide it using either of the ways I have mentioned, but me, I like to use it in the Terraform.tvars. But for example, in the future, if I have I will deploy these things on different environments. I will have Terraform.tdev.tvars and then prod and UIT, QA, and so on. But in this case, when I will deploy, I need to do -var file name, -var -file, and then I specify the name of the variable of the file of the variables. If I am call it with another name different than this one is the default one. So I need to back here and they need to go to provide Jenkins instance type. Yep. In this case, either I can use it here or I can use it directly here, the value, provide the value here, as long as I'm creating one instance. So it's better to have it in tvars. Otherwise, if I will create too many instances, it's better to put the value here, because the value will be dynamic for each resource, each like module, or the resource, each resource will be created with the module will have its own values, not all of them having the same value. So when you have one module that creates one resource and the name will be unique, so it's better to provide it here instead. And now if I do Terraform plan, it's still asking me for the secret name. Why? Because I have already give it here a secret name. If I remove it from here and I try this time to do Terraform plan, yeah, it will work. So it will gonna create two resources, is the instance and the security group. So let me do Terraform apply auto approve. So now it's deployed. So I can go to my instance. So in this example, so for example, you need in this case you need to go mandatory to the AWS console and then copy the first password, like, because once Jenkins is created, it's gonna create your first password that you will change it later on. But in this case, if you don't want to reach to the console, to the AWS to see the password, and you want to see it somehow, in another way, so I suggest you, for example, to go to the template, and you already have, for example, an IP gateway integrated with the Lambda, and the Lambda send an SNS topic, for example, a message that you already subscribe to it. So you just need to come here, and then you do you know already where the place where the /var/lib, where the password first part is stored, and whatever you type the patch, you get the value, right? You get the value of this one, of the password, and then you send it as an AP gateway through the AP gateway that will hit the Lambda, and then the Lambda will send it to the SNS, and you will receive a message once the Jenkins installed and ready to use. It will notify you that you already have this password to use it to authenticate the first time. I hope that's clear for you now. So if I come here and I refresh, I will see there is an instance that is running, and it's still initializing. Means that the user data, it's still installed. Is not like everything is because if it's running, but it's still installing the user data I provided, like the bash scripts I provided during the booting of the instance. As long as I didn't provide any SSH key, to authenticate to the instance. Either you can attach an IAM role that allow you to use the session manager, and this IAM role you need to have the Amazon this policy to create an IAM role with this policy. So instead of using, if you don't forget to it, or you don't want to use SSH to authenticate your AWS to your instance, sorry, you just need to go create an IAM role for of type instance, and you need to make sure that you have this policy attached to the IAM role is Amazon SSM managed instance core. This one allow you these two conditions, that your instance should reside in a public that has reachability to internet, or if your instance residing within a private subnet does not have reachability to the internet, you need to create an SSM endpoint so that your instance can call the SSM service. And the second one is to have this, like have this role on IAM policy attached to the role. You're gonna attach it to your instance profile. And another one is make sure that the instance you are using it is using the SSM agent. So let me back to the instance. I will try to connect through the console. So to make sure if the bash script I provided to the instance to execute it during the boot is executed successfully or not, I need to go to var log /cloud init minus output log. So here you can see whether if there is any error or not, but you can see there is create sim link, and this one means that Jenkins service is running successfully. So if I do service Jenkins status, you can see it's running successfully. So let me try to reach it through the console. So I will go and copy the IP address, and they will add the default port, and they will hit enter. So we can see now it asks me to have access to this path to get the first password. So we'll do that. As I suggested you last time, if you don't want to come to the console and see it, and to see this one, you can add an extra bash script to call an API call or API gateway integrated with Lambda that's called an SNS topic that you already subscribed, and it will you just need to cut this thing, and then yeah, maybe you cut this one, you get the password, and you send it through a message. Otherwise, you need to come to the AWS console and have it. Yeah, so now for example, let me install those plugins. Yeah, and now your Jenkins is ready to use. So here you just need to provide name, password, Yeah, now you have this console. So once I will look out, here you see the Jenkins is set it up. Yeah, our session came to end. I hope that you find some beneficial informations and you understand some things. You you got what you were looking for. If you have any question, please let me know in the comments, and please make sure before you end this video to remove all your instances to avoid charging by AWS. So you need to do Terraform to approve. So in the next sessions, I will make sure to show you how to deploy SonarCube with using RDS instance instead of using like a local database in production, and also how to use remote state to store your state instead of have it here locally. So we wait until everything is destroyed to make sure we are not get billing by about nothing by AWS. And then I want to thank you for watching this video, and then see you in the next video of SonarCube and the remote state of AWS, or sorry, the SonarCube, and also talking about remote state of Terraform. Thank you.